Imagine confronting a steel behemoth so formidable that your weapons glance off its hide like raindrops. This was the terrifying reality of the King Tiger tank. Yet, in just 1 week, these giants were left stranded, out of fuel, burning in the villages of Belgium. What fatal weakness transformed Germany's ultimate weapon into its ultimate defeat? Stay with us, for the truth history attempted to conceal is about to be revealed. The Ardennes forest lay silent, blanketed in snow. Pine trees stood like silent guardians, their boughs heavy with ice, while a weak winter sun stretched long shadows across the frozen hills. This quiet was broken not by nature, but by a deep, mechanical tremor, the iron heartbeat of something monstrous. From the mist emerged the King Tiger, 70 tons of steel grinding forward, its cannon a menacing spear aimed at destiny. To the terrified villagers peering through shuttered windows, it appeared less a machine and more a creature, a predator forged from iron and fire. Its presence was overwhelming. The sloped armor, glistening with frost, was thick enough to repel most Allied shells. Its long-barreled 88mm gun could deliver death from over 2 kilometers away, before an enemy even spotted it. The roar of its engine echoed like trapped thunder through the narrow valleys, rattling window panes and shaking the resolve of those who heard it. Soldiers whispered that nothing could stop it. Some prayed, while others gripped their rifles, knowing they faced a moving fortress. Yet, within this spectacle of fear, lay a cruel paradox. The seemingly unstoppable monster carried its own demise deep within, an insatiable hunger for fuel, for speed, and for ground too fragile to bear its immense weight. Beneath the snow, roads cracked, bridges groaned, and every mile forward demanded more resources than its masters could provide. The stage was set for Hitler's final gamble in December 1944, a desperate offensive built around steel giants that appeared invincible, yet were destined to be ensnared by their own immense power. The King Tigers roared into battle, but history would remember them not for their triumph, but for their silence. By late 1944, Germany was a nation backed into a corner. The Red Army advanced relentlessly from the east, while the Anglo-American forces pressed from the west, their supply lines growing stronger. Yet Adolf Hitler was not ready to surrender. He envisioned one last, desperate offensive to split the Allied front, capture the port of Antwerp, and force a negotiated peace. He chose the Ardennes for this gamble, the same forested region where German forces had achieved a stunning breakthrough in 1940. At the core of this plan was armored might. Hitler demanded shock and awe, turning to his heaviest weapons to instill terror. The Tiger II, known to the Allies as the King Tiger, was the embodiment of this new doctrine. With frontal armor up to 180mm thick, it was nearly impervious to Allied anti-tank guns. Its high-velocity 80mm cannon could destroy an American Sherman tank at extreme distances. On paper, it was the ultimate predator. However, this choice revealed a fatal contradiction. The blitzkrieg tactics that had once brought Germany victory relied on speed and maneuverability. The King Tiger was the opposite. Slow, cumbersome, and desperately thirsty for fuel. Each mile it traveled consumed gasoline that Germany could no longer spare. Each bridge it crossed risked collapse under its colossal weight. It was a weapon of intimidation, suited for defense, not for the rapid breakthrough Hitler needed. The story of the King Tiger began not on the battlefield, but in German design offices and factories. By 1942, engineers were already working on a successor to the formidable Tiger WWII, a machine that would dominate the battlefield. The result was a behemoth, the heaviest operational tank of the war. Its heavily sloped armor could deflect incoming shells, and its powerful gun could strike with devastating precision. But the birth of this colossus came at a great cost. Germany's strained war industry struggled to build it. Only about 490 were ever produced, a tiny number compared to the tens of thousands of Allied tanks. The King Tiger became a propaganda icon, a symbol of German technological genius and invincibility. Yet, beneath the surface, problems festered. Its engine was overstrained, its transmission prone to failure, and its fuel consumption was staggering. It was a giant tethered by its own immense needs. In December 1944, the armored spearhead of Joachim Peiper's SS unit, including the fearsome King Tigers, rumbled into the Ardennes. The journey was a nightmare. The massive tanks inched across groaning bridges and navigated icy, narrow roads. Their crews were miserable, but their orders were clear: push west, seize bridges, and capture fuel. Without gasoline, the King Tiger was nothing but a stationary steel coffin. The road to the town of Stavelot was treacherous. Peiper sent faster, lighter Panthers ahead. At dawn, they clashed with American defenders. An anti-tank gun ambush set one Panther ablaze, but a second smashed through, crushing the gun and its crew under its tracks. Behind them, the King Tigers advanced, their sheer size blocking the light in the narrow streets, their rumbling treads echoing like thunder. Yet the first cracks in the German plan appeared immediately. Peiper's tanks were running dangerously low on fuel. Their key objective was a large American fuel depot. But American officers, understanding the stakes, made a fateful decision. They destroyed their own supplies. Explosions tore through the depot, sending thousands of gallons of fuel up in flames, the lifeblood of the German offensive burning against the winter sky. The King Tigers, now low on fuel, were stranded in a town they could not hold for long. The American counterattack was swift. Sherman tanks and M10 tank destroyers moved into position. The battle for Stavelot began. When a company of King Tigers, led by Commander Jürgen Wessel, moved to intervene, they were met with fierce resistance. An M10 shell smashed into the barrel of Wessel's own tank, disabling its main gun. He commandeered another, but the tide was turning. The Americans had learned how to fight the giants. They exploited the King Tiger's lack of mobility in confined spaces. Then, a new sound filled the air: the roar of P-47 Thunderbolt fighter bombers. Diving from the clouds, they unleashed rockets and bombs upon the German column. King Tigers, once invincible against ground fire, were now vulnerable from above. They erupted in fireballs, their armor useless against aerial assault. Amid the chaos, a final, decisive blow was struck. Beneath the bridge over the Amblev River, American engineers braved enemy fire to wire the structure with explosives. With a thunderous roar, the bridge was obliterated, collapsing into the river in a shower of stone and steel. The road west for Peiper's column was severed. For the King Tigers on the wrong side of the river, it was a death sentence. They were trapped, their power rendered useless. The collapse of the bridge shattered the German illusion. The order was given: abandon the tanks. The crews of the King Tigers, who had trusted their steel fortresses with their lives, now climbed down into the snow, leaving their mighty machines behind. The giants stood silent, some scarred by battle, others simply out of fuel, transformed from symbols of terror into hulking monuments of failure. The aftermath delivered a clear lesson. The King Tiger was an engineering marvel, unmatched in armor and firepower, yet it was too heavy, too slow, and too fuel-hungry for an army with broken logistics. Technology alone could not win the war. The Americans, through determination, ingenuity, and sacrifice, had proven that no machine was truly invincible. The legacy of the King Tiger endures as a paradox. It was both a terrifying weapon and a profound failure. Its hulks, left rusting in Belgian fields and villages, serve as a stark warning. In war, sheer power is meaningless without the mobility, supply, and strategy to sustain it. The King Tiger remains a cautionary tale of how ambition, when it outstrips reality, leads only to defeat. The silence that fell over the Ardennes in the wake of the battle was not one of peace. but of exhaustion. The snow, once pristine, was now a scarred landscape of blackened earth, trampled paths, and the grim debris of war. And at the heart of this desolation stood the King Tigers, not as a triumphant vanguard of a new Reich, but as frozen leviathans, their steel skin cooling in the winter air. For the American GIs who cautiously advanced through the ruins of Stavelot and the surrounding villages, the sight of these abandoned giants was both a relief and a revelation. They would approach the hulks, their boots crunching on the frozen ground, and lay a hand on the cold armor. They traced the gashes where shells had failed to penetrate, knocked on the thick plates that had once seemed impenetrable, and peered into the dark, empty hatches. The myth of invincibility dissolved not with a bang, but with the simple, tangible reality of a machine that had been stopped. A soldier from Pennsylvania later wrote home, "We found the monster, and it was just a machine after all. A big, hungry, broken machine." The German retreat was a funeral march in the snow. The crews who had once felt like gods of war inside their steel citadels now trudged eastward, a disorganized stream of weary, frostbitten men. They carried their wounded on makeshift stretchers, their breath misting in the bitter air. The thunder of their engines was replaced by the howling wind and the distant crump of artillery, the sound of the Allied noose tightening. They glanced back only once, not at the enemy, but at the silent forms of their tanks, their own strength left behind to be picked over by the crows and the enemy. The belief in a wonder weapon, the last flicker of hope that had fueled their final offensive, had been extinguished in the Belgian snow. The strategic implications echoed far beyond the narrow valleys. The failure of the King Tiger in the Ardennes became a brutal case study for military strategists. It was the ultimate proof that a weapon system cannot be judged in isolation. A tank is not just its armor thickness or its gun caliber. It is a component of a vast and intricate web that includes fuel trucks, spare parts, sturdy bridges, capable recovery vehicles, and air superiority. Germany had built a magnificent sword, but its armory was empty. The Allies, in contrast, wielded a robust and relentless hammer. For every King Tiger that bogged down or ran dry, a dozen Shermans, easier to build, easier to maintain, and easier to fuel, could be brought to bear. The war was not won by the best tank, but by the most effective army. The fate of the individual King Tigers was as varied as their crews. Some became temporary trophies. American engineers, ever pragmatic, would attempt to tow the less damaged beasts for study. They were curious to understand the secrets of their angled armor and powerful guns, their findings later influencing post-war tank design on both sides of the Iron Curtain. Other wrecks were simply too heavy or too damaged to move. They were stripped of anything useful: machine guns, optics, personal effects left behind in the haste of retreat, and then left to the elements. For years afterward, farmers in the Ardennes would use the immovable hulls as anchors for fences or as grim playground fixtures for their children. The broader Ardennes offensive, the Battle of the Bulge, would rage on for several more weeks, its ferocity undiminished. But the breaking of Piper's spearhead and the neutralization of his most powerful weapons was a critical turning point. The German advance had lost its sharpest point. The initiative slowly, bloodily, but irrevocably shifted back to the Allies. The King Tigers that did see action elsewhere found themselves in a defensive, hopeless battle, their great guns blunting Allied attacks but unable to reverse the overwhelming tide. In the end, the story of the King Tiger is a timeless lesson in the hubris of technological overreach. It stands as a monument to a fundamental truth of warfare: that logistics, infrastructure, and strategic depth are the unglamorous foundations upon which victory is built, and that no single weapon, no matter how terrifying, can compensate for their absence. The King Tiger was not defeated by a superior tank. It was defeated by a lack of gasoline, by a blown bridge, by the mud of a Belgian winter, and by the relentless pressure of an enemy that could afford to lose 10 tanks for every one of the German giants. Today, a handful of these colossal machines survive in museums around the world. They are polished, silent, and surrounded by respectful quiet. But to truly understand their story, one must look not at these restored relics, but to the few photographs from that December. A king tiger, alone in a field, its tracks frozen fast, a light dusting of snow on its turret. A king of the battlefield, dethroned not by a rival, but by the mundane, inescapable realities of war.